understanding mental health in Arab Muslims communities and how shame and honor and all these values really interplay into the concept of mental health and how we understand it and how we try to treat it. And that's why we have amazing speakers that come and talk about these things. And then there is a questionnaire that deals with the survey, or with the research, I'm sorry. If you guys can just fill that out. It's anonymous, so your ID is not on there. But please, when you do sign the consent form, you have to sign your signature and date it. And then there is one more sheet, and that's from the speaker. It's part of her presentation. And so make sure if you don't have these now, you can get one up right now, or you can do it at the end. But it will be collected, so you can find Ahmed or one of the UNI personnel, and they'll take it from you. So just don't forget to turn it in. And so tonight's speaker is Amina Ftouni. Sorry. She's a clinical psychotherapist at the Michigan
School of Professional Psychology.
School of Professional Psychology. Sorry, I was trying to remember all the P's. She is going to be speaking at a very important topic today that, you know, all of us have dealt with at one level or another, or at one time or another. And sorry, those are my kids. And this is something that a lot of us struggle with, and it's not something that just goes away, and it's not necessarily only about adolescents who deal with this, but body image and self-worth are very important concepts, especially in the age of social media, which is constantly being thrown at us. So she's going to delve in, give us her insight about it, and if you guys have questions along the way, I'm pretty sure she'll be happy to answer them. If you can all please welcome Amina Ftouni to the stage. Thank you.
Hi guys, thanks for coming. So thanks for taking the time out to listen to me too. I'm Amina, and I'm talking about body image, self-worth, and then I added self-empowerment, which is why that actually is what you guys are holding. The two sheets that you guys got from them at the front, that's kind of a little exercise that I usually do with clients to help with self-empowerment. So I thought that you guys could also kind of use it yourselves, learn how to use it, and then if you ever have any friends who are talking about low self-worth or not feeling their best, you can also like suggest something like that. You can easily find it on Google. So to start, what is body image? So body image, does anybody want to say what, or does anybody want to talk on body image themselves? No? Okay, so body image is basically a self-interpretation. It's self-curated. It's an image that you've come up with in your own mind about what you think you look like, and also what you think other people think you look like. So body image does not necessarily mean that it really is what you look like. It's actually just what you have created in your mind for yourself to look like. So it's pretty complex, body image. It involves a few of these things, all of these things listed, as well as a few others that aren't listed. Body image is influenced by your mentality. It also affects your mental state. It's physical. It does have to do with your physical appearance and how you feel like you appear. It takes an emotional toll on us. It's perceptive. It's how you perceive yourself. Again, imaginative. It's not necessarily exactly how you do look. It's just what you're perceiving you look like. It's also culturally reinforced, which I think everyone is used to. You see it on TV. You have these beauty ideals that you see on TV or you see in magazines that aren't necessarily true, but you do compare yourselves to those all the time. And it's learned. It's not something that you're born with. So through cultural norms, through whatever you are exposed to within your culture, that's another thing, is beauty varies within cultures. So what is defined as beautiful in America doesn't necessarily stand when you go elsewhere. I don't know if you guys have ever come across some of the photoshopped images that they have floating around Instagram, Facebook. They took one girl and then they photoshopped her into the beauty standards of, I actually should have posted a picture of it here, but they photoshopped her into the beauty standards of each one of the other countries, and it was so interesting to see because what one country viewed as beautiful was, like, they were polar opposites. Some countries it was dark, dark thin, dark thick, and then you have the polar opposites where it's, in some countries it was very thin and very, very pale. So it's kind of who sets that standard, you know? Why is it okay for somebody in one culture to be thick and dark-skinned and dark hair and then be considered beautiful, while the same person within that culture is not dark or thick and not considered beautiful? It just kind of, it just goes to show how phony beauty ideals really are. And then at the second to last, it causes a lot of self-judgment. Not only self-judgment, but it also causes people to judge others, which creates this cycle of self-reflection, of negative ruminating about your worth, your self-worth. Who can body image affect? It affects everybody. It's not just a women issue, a female issue. It affects all ages, genders, people of all countries. It doesn't really have a specific norm. So my next question is, how many of you here have felt victim to body image, self-worth? Or how many, like, body image and then affecting your self-worth? If you don't all raise your hands, you're lying. Yeah, so it's affected everybody. And what does body image affect? It affects the self-esteem. It affects the person's sense of self-worth, the way their self-respect, whether or not they're going, like, they choose to value themselves or devalue themselves. And that's the way you view yourself is how others are going to view you. It's going to be a reflection. So if you don't feel great about yourselves, other people aren't going to look at you in the best light, unfortunately. And so it's been going, fortunately, it's been getting a lot of word of mouth lately, but it's so true, the saying that, like, if you don't love yourself, how can you expect anybody else to love you? Unless you love yourself, you're going to be reflecting a lot of your insecurities onto the other person, which is where the issues come at hand. So body image, it affects self-esteem, your sense of fulfillment, your potential ability, because a lot of times, a lot of people hold themselves back from achieving things because they think, oh, I'm not beautiful enough, or, oh, I won't get this job because I might not fit the standards. But that's something that should be, you need to try that. You can't limit yourself from that just because you think that that's what the standard, that's what is going to be accepted or not accepted. You'd be surprised. Now people are breaking barriers, and that's because they're going against they're combating their low self-esteem. They're combating the false self-image that they might have. And they're building their self-worth. It also has affected body image. It affects the person's attitude and behaviors. So I have the things listed on there. So hostility, sensitivity to criticism, overly critical, preoccupation with problems, levels of motivation, dependence. How do you think it affects a person's attitude and behaviors? In what way? I didn't write it on there because I'm not going to answer that. I want somebody else to guess. How do you think that body image, there are two ways it can affect a person, their attitude and behavior. self-esteem wise, or how they perceive themselves and how they may treat others or treat themselves. Anyone want to guess? Asma?
I guess when you have a negative body image, then when people criticize you, you take that to heart and you let it affect you and question your abilities and how you look and your performance. And it makes you, and you may give a reaction, like a negative reaction to whoever you're speaking to.
Yes. So it's going to the two ways. So a person can say something to you about your appearance, and you can take it self-critically. You can be the type to internalize it. You take it hard on yourself. You beat yourself up over it. I'm not good enough. They were right, and so on and so forth. Or there's the second attitude where you can feel so low about yourself, and rather than internalizing it, you externalize your low feelings of self-worth, but you don't admit it. You make the people around you feel lower than you feel. So it's more, you're basically just, the things you say to others is how you're feeling. And a lot of times we do face, more than oftentimes we face these people. That's what a bully is. A bully is someone with low self-esteem who will not internalize it, they will not accept it, and their feeling of self-worth is so low that they need to make the other people around them feel just as low as them, if not lower. So that's another way it affects, and then mental health, obviously. So it eventually takes a toll on a person to the point where they develop a mental health disorder, which can lead to eating disorders, which is a pretty common one. Most often people think body image, low body image, eating disorder, anxiety disorders, mood disorders, and then also personality disorders. So these are three ways that body image can affect, and these are more psychological issues, but if a lot of you have been to the other ones, you know that mental health doesn't just have to do with psychological things that come towards you, psychological motivators, psychological factors. What are the other factors other than psychology? There are three of them. So what factors can play into the development of, not the development of a mental health disorder, but what three factors influence your mental health?
Your biological and sociological.
Yeah. So if you guys have ever heard of the biopsychosocial factors, your mental well-being is influenced by biological factors, psychological factors, and social factors. So a lot of the things listed on the previous slide fall under the psychological factor categories. Trauma was one that wasn't brought up, but that is a psychological factor that can negatively affect a person. It can stick with them, and the way with trauma and the development of an eating disorder, it's when you go through a traumatic event, you eventually come out of it feeling like you don't have any more control. You didn't have control over what had happened to you. You didn't have control over maybe a traumatic event that you had witnessed. And so what ends up happening leading into the topic, one of the mental disorder topics, the eating disorder topic, a way to regain control is through your food, because while you feel like you do not have control over what's surrounding you, what's happening around you, what has happened to you, or what has happened to somebody else, you can control the food that you take in or the food that you're taking out. And so that's what it leads to maladaptive coping techniques, and also social factors influence these things. So a traumatic event happens, it is caused by somebody who's in your social circle, typically. The family dynamics, healthy family dynamics, healthy relationships, healthy support systems, those are really important for the development of a healthy mental state, and also a healthy body image. Then we already talked about community and cultural norms. So what is an eating disorder? A persistent, according to the APA, it's a disturbance of eating or eating-related behavior that results in the altered consumption of food, and it impairs a person's physical health and functioning. Is anybody familiar with any eating disorders? So there are 4 of them. Mm-hmm. That one is associated with bulimia, but no, you nailed it. The last one is actually not commonly known, and that's actually the first one we're going to talk about. So there's pica, and that one is it's most common in children. So you actually got the other 3, so good job. So pica, it's the persistent eating of non-nutritive, non-food substances. So it's literally eating anything you're not supposed to be consuming into your body. These things that you're consuming are they're actual cravings. And so in order to receive the diagnosis, it has to be inappropriate for the individual's developmental level. So it does happen within childhood, but if you're an infant, like if you're 3 years old, you're not going to get the diagnosis if you're found eating dirt. It can occur at any age, but it is mostly common during childhood. The next one, anorexia nervosa. It's the characteristics are self-starvation. It is the most common known disorder. And things to look out for with anorexia, because you're not taking in the proper nutrients, you have low energy, you have that fear of gaining weight, and so you're not eating anything. It also interferes with your social relationships and your day-to-day functioning, because you're not taking in the nutrients that you need. You no longer have the energy to partake in any of the activities that you usually partake in. And then because you're no longer partaking in the activities you used to partake in, you're not hanging out with the people you used to hang out with. You're not going to work or performing at your best like you used to. And so it ends up affecting your social relationships as well. Bulimia is the next one. And the characteristic for that one is binge eating, so eating an uncontrollable amount of food and then also purging it. Or also over-exercising. It's overeating and then overdoing something so that you can release that food again. So while anorexia has to do with your appearance and your weight appearance, bulimia doesn't necessarily that's not really a criteria that's required for the diagnosis for the disorder. You don't necessarily have to, you're not doing it for the weight appearance.
With DSM-5, a main distinction is actually the BMI. So they can present the same, anorexia and bulimia, sometimes not necessarily, but most of the time they do. But the big distinction is if you have a low BMI versus if you have a low BMI.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The low BMI is anorexia.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can have a normal weight, but still be bulimic.
Right.
Exactly. Thanks for the specification. And that's the extent of, so you're not necessarily doing it for your appearance. You're not doing it to appear skinny. This one is pretty common when it's that control thing again. You get in a fight with somebody and it's not going your way, or something is out of your hand again. What's in your hands? Eating, and then what you do with that food. So it's another way of regaining control. So you still look the same, but that is definitely, of course, not healthy. So it's not a proper or appropriate coping technique for a fight that you just got into. Binge eating disorder. This one differs from bulimia because this one you're not really compensating, you're not doing any compensatory behavior. So you're eating and uncontrolled, and you can't control it. So you're overeating, and that's it. So it's just you're eating and you're not doing, there's nothing that you are doing after that. So a big thing about this one is it's so out of this person's hand that it affects their social life because they won't go out and hang out with their friends anymore because they're too embarrassed to go out to eat with their friends because the one meal that their friends are going to eat and be done with, they're still going to be hungry. So they're shameful, embarrassed, and then that causes obviously significant distress. So it's kind of, with all of these, it's kind of like a cycle where you have the disorder or you have the stressor that's to begin with, and then your coping technique is one of these 4 ways, and then obviously you're unhappy with that as well. If you were truly happy with what happens, you would afterwards, you'd probably stop doing it, or you wouldn't be feeling depressed as you are doing it. And so again, it's a cycle. You just kind of repeat the same thing over and over again. But it's a cycle that is really hard to be broken. Especially when it's the only coping technique that you're familiar with. We're creatures of habit, and so it's really hard to break habits. So once you're into it, you can fall into a really deep hole that you may not be able to get yourself out of if it isn't for somebody bringing it to your attention. So I can't stress how important that it is for you. If you maybe are suspecting that a friend or a family member might be struggling with any one of these disorders, it's so important to actually bring it up to them in a caring and non-judgmental way, but definitely try to bring it up to them so that you guys together can seek out help. So the order for help, it's the intervention, which would be the person bringing it up to the person struggling with the eating disorder. And then you seek out the professional treatment. Actually, this is a cycle for all mental disorders, to be completely honest. Like, that's why I left it very vague, is because it all begins with an intervention. So if you know of anybody who is struggling with any kind of mental health disorder, bring it up to them. And don't do it, you don't want to do it in a judgmental way. If you have any questions about how to bring it up, you can ask afterwards, or maybe ask on the side. You can message me or something, and we can talk about that. But the first step is to intervene somehow. And then once that happens, you and the person who intervened, you seek out the professional treatment. So an important thing is that when you're looking for a therapist, it's like shopping. So you don't always end up with, or you don't always come across a therapist and then that's it. This is the perfect therapist for me. It's not like a one case deal. Not every therapist is the same. So sometimes you might go to one therapist and it might not be a good fit. A lot of people get discouraged after that and they think, well, therapy's not for me. I didn't like this therapist, so I'm just gonna give up. There's no hope for me. So they fall back into that negative cycle that they were once in. But finding a therapist is exactly like shopping. So while you may find a therapist and you may go to the first appointment and it's not a good fit, you're not stuck with that therapist forever. You're not bound to them. you can keep looking. And I encourage you, and I encourage you to encourage all of your friends who may have lost hope to keep looking, because eventually you'll find someone who is a good fit. It requires ongoing support. So as we had mentioned earlier, a big thing that you fall into the hole that you start, I guess, with these negative coping techniques is because you're lacking that sense of support. You don't have a support system who, when issues arise, you can talk to, or you may be, the issues at home are maybe so out of hand that you don't have any friends at all. You just have no one to talk to. So that's your way of handling the situation and what's going on, is developing the negative coping techniques. And then recovery, if you notice, it's like a circle because it's ongoing. So recovery, it's not a one-time thing. It's not that, oh, I'm recovered and I'm forever going to be recovered. No, your thoughts are still there. The thoughts that first got you into it are still going to be there, and that's just human nature. We all have negative thoughts, and so you have to learn how to manage them. And just because you learn how to manage them doesn't mean that they're not going to keep creeping up on you. So for the last thing, does anybody have questions about like the eating disorders and stuff at all? No? Okay. So for the last part, developing healthy body image and self-worth. There's not much that, it's such a broad topic that I only have, for self-worth and body image, I only have this one slide to talk about it, to discuss the topic. Because honestly, building your self-worth, your self-esteem, it really does come down to these 8 things. A lot of times we develop our low body image because we're comparing ourselves to others, or because maybe we were raised by a certain standard that we felt like we needed to fulfill. If we didn't fulfill, then we were a failure. So you need to throw all those away. Throw away the comparisons, throw away the way that you were raised, the image that you were told that you needed to fit. Throw all of those away, because at the end of the day, you are your own person and you have to be realistic about who you are. It might take a lot of introspection. You might need to take a lot of me time, alone time, in order to figure that out. But eventually, it all comes down to being realistic about you, indulging in the activities that you enjoy doing. So it doesn't necessarily, this whole route is like a one-person road. You can get encouraged to do it by a friend, but at the end of the day, it's your own journey to go down. What your interests are may not be the same interests as anybody else that you know, and that's okay. That's how it should be. We're all unique. We all have unique personalities, and we all have different interests and different dislikes. So you have to be comfortable with being alone and doing all of this alone. So does anybody have any questions at all?
For example, if they have like a negative image about themselves, like why do they have, for example, for myself,
Yeah.
I pointed out to someone before they think it. Do you know why people sometimes have that tendency?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question. And I think like a lot of people have that habit as well. I'm guilty. I try to stop. I try not to do it, but I have been guilty of doing that too. But I think it comes from a sense of not wanting to be embarrassed. It comes from again, it comes back to control. As long as you're saying it first, that person cannot judge you. You're still in control of the situation. Like, they can think it, but if you said it first, it's less of a judgment than if you hadn't said it first. So with you'd be surprised with a lot of the things. With a lot of our behaviors, it all comes down to control. while some personalities are more controlling than others, we all have that bit of control in us. Yeah, that was a good question.
Can you talk a little bit about bias disorder?
What is it?
Bias disorder?
Yeah, so that's no longer considered a disorder. So that's kind of what the body image is now. So with body dysmorphia, it's just you looking in a mirror and you not seeing what is really reflecting in the mirror. You're seeing what is in your mind. So again, like with the body image, you're curating that based on maybe how you're feeling, or maybe what's been told to you before, and maybe based on what's happened before, what you've overheard people saying in the house. I mean, I'm sure we've grown up with our moms talking about their own weight. So it kind of gets, again, it's learned, it's passed down. So you start to look in the mirror and you're like, well, mom doesn't look fat, but like I have a little flab here, so maybe I do.
Just in addition to what she's saying, so with body dysmorphism, it mainly becomes a problem when it inhibits your daily living. So we all have thoughts where, you know, oh no, the summer's coming, I worry about my summer body, oh, I'm gaining weight, this is that, oh, like I have a big nose, or this is that. You might think that, and these passive thoughts come and go, they bounce off, or they stick with you for a few days. But the problem is when it becomes something that inhibits your daily living, is when it's considered something that needs to be managed and treated.
Yeah, and so that's kind of, it comes back to, for example, with anorexia disorder, you're not perceiving what others are perceiving when you look into the mirror. You're seeing someone who's a lot thicker than everybody is seeing, and so because of that, you're no longer taking in the appropriate nutrients that you need to function. So it does end up affecting your day-to-day functioning. And that's the thing is, with all of these disorders, with all of any kind of mental health disorder, it is considered a disorder when it starts to affect your day-to-day functioning or your social relationships. So we all are guilty of having a few depressive feelings every now and then, a few anxious thoughts now and then, a few worrying thoughts now and then. But when it gets to the point where we're worrying so much about something we're avoiding it, that's when it kind of becomes an issue. Or we're feeling so down that we're no longer eating, or we're no longer getting out of bed, or we no longer have the motivation to do the things we used to enjoy. That's when it becomes a problem. Did that answer your question at all? Okay. Anyone else?
What are, do you have any personal techniques or something you like to use, or when you counsel people, like to use kind of boost how they perceive themselves?
Yes, actually, it's the exercise that you guys grabbed walking in. So this is one of my favorite exercises. Well, one thing is actually like talking to them, and so I will say one thing. When you compare yourself, you're often comparing yourself to another person's good qualities, right? Another thing is, like, people only show you what they want to show you. You don't know what's going on behind closed doors. You don't know what kind of thoughts they're having, what kind of things they're struggling with. So when you're comparing yourself to somebody else, you're just comparing yourself to what they're showing you, the good things. Who's going to show the bad things? No one. Do you show your bad qualities? No. So another thing that I do ask the person is, okay, you're comparing yourself to this one person. I tell them to imagine whoever it is that they're comparing themselves to. You're comparing yourself to this person for their good qualities. What about their bad qualities? Because sometimes you will know the person's bad qualities, whether it's a personality characteristic, whether it's a bad habit that they partake in, whether or not it's their lifestyle. You do have a little insight of their bad qualities. But you don't think of that when you're comparing yourself to them. You just think of the good things. So I'm pretty sure, yeah, because it's been 100% of the time when I have somebody do that and I ask them, if they were to actually trade their life, their lifestyle, what they have with this person's life and everything they have for that one quality that they're comparing themselves to, would they? And the answer is always no. So that's one, and then the other one is this one. So what I want you to do is go ahead, the first page, go ahead and circle the qualities that apply to you. So they compiled a list of valued qualities. They're qualities that most people have said that the perfect person or like a person they valued had. So go ahead and circle the ones you think apply to you, most apply to you. Does everybody have one? No.
What were you saying? Sorry if I'm jumping in.
No, it's perfect because there are things that.
I want to just encourage you.
That's what I'm, yeah.
Because I love when it's more
what
people.
I was
I don't want
trying
to just be
to,
like,
because I'm done, to be honest.
just think of more questions.
Because the rest of it, I wanted to leave it up to them. So basically, that's, and the thing is like, we'll sit in silence or
Yeah.
because it's not, self-image isn't really something that you can earn self-esteem. It's not really something.
It's the esteem of yourself.
Exactly. Like you can't really lecture about it. Yeah.
What were you going to do? What up?
Yeah. So can I send it?
I don't know. I have no idea how techie stuff works. Oh, did you want to like go through it?
Yeah.
You're doing great on time. It's fine. Yeah, sorry if I was doing.
No, it was honestly, it was perfect because then it gave me more.
I know, I didn't want
It
you
gave
to.
me more things to. Sorry, these are like photo
Oh,
shoot
sorry.
pictures. No, I'm just explaining. They're there, but I'm just like. I'm just not obsessed with myself. I'm not obsessed with myself. A photographer sent them to me.
You have your background of yourself on your phone?
No.
Sorry, I didn't get a chance to introduce myself earlier. I was stunned. I just came from downtown.
Yeah, no, you're
And
totally
like I
okay.
was with these and then I forgot you were. I don't know. I didn't know I was going to be in here from a lot of organizations.
No, you're totally okay. Taj kind of
3 hours
introduced you.
just.
Oh,
Okay.
well, kudos to you.
I just talking smack a lot.
No. She said, no, she actually said you were a really cool guy. Because I asked her if she was going to be here, and
Yeah.
she had said no. And then she had said, yeah, have fun. Thanks for coming.
I think everyone has one except like a few people. So.
I think, she's my cousin. The one that was, did you get one?
It doesn't.
Were you able to get one?
Sorry, I was on the phone.
No?
Hi.
I'm almost done.
Just leave them like.
Okay, so did everybody
You gotta tell me 4
circle
times.
what they think applies to them? Is everyone done with that? Yeah. Okay. Do you guys all have somebody in the room that you know? Okay, so I want you to take that second sheet and give it to somebody in the room that knows you. Where's the second one? Oh, that was no. Yeah, me. I'm doing yours.
Am I supposed to be here?
No.
Wait, I wanted to talk to you about this later.
Which one?
Haiku? I've never heard of it. Is that how you write it?
Yeah. You know, I don't even know how to pronounce it. Like, I always pronounce it like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'm saying if
I
you
thought
want.
meant like later.
If
like,
you want. So like Shadi's the one that usually speaks, and he's talking about their spiritual factors and stuff like that. So. If you want, you don't have to.
Spiritual. I'm
just
trying to
saying.
think of what kind of spiritual factors, like religious thing, like spiritually in the sense of like religion or like
Yeah.
what you believe in.
You don't have to, but I'm just saying. Or you could talk about. Just finish the exercise.
Okay.
Just,
And then
what was
it's
your
done. We're
finish?
done anyways,
Yeah,
right?
pretty much.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Are you guys done? Is everybody done? Yeah. No. Okay. So we're up for time, but the purpose of that. So what I want you to do when you go home, and what you can have other people do, I want you to look at the two sheets, and I want you to compare them. Look at what you circled and what you may not have circled, and then look at what the other person circled about you. And a lot of times you'll notice that what the other person circled is something that you've been completely overlooking about yourself, and you may not have thought was a part of you, and it was a quality that you carried. Usually what I also do is have a person, once they've circled their own star, what they wish they had. That way when the other person circles their stuff, sometimes the star that they had starred was circled by their friend. So that's it. Thanks for coming, guys. Bye.
All right. 363005. 363005. We have a winner. Thank you all for coming. That concludes the program. Appreciate you guys coming out. Join us next month as well.
One quick thing, guys, please, the surveys you guys collect from the front, if you haven't done, you can just bring them up, perimeter area on your way out, or the consent form, if there is time, please. And does anyone else have any questions regarding anything we discussed today? I'll answer them. Anything else about like body dysmorphic disorder or any of the eating disorder stuff? If you're out to see them. So if like a child told you, hey, someone was saying something, or a teenager was saying, it's important to understand that it's a good thing to explain to kids that the stuff that people say or think about you or whatever it is, there's cases of it. So it's not something that's going to stick to forever. It's something that's going to go away. Stand up for yourself and just know that what other people think that shouldn't matter is what you think matters most. So it's very good to encourage them to know that, help them build their confidence within themselves and not to worry about other people think. And it's transient. It doesn't, it's not something that always sticks with you forever.
And can I add something as well?
Should have a better answer.
No, that was a good answer, actually, but just to add to it. So the question was, so what do you say to a child who's been getting bullied? So the bully's been saying something to the child, because this is actually going to be important for your own children, it happens, and we're trying to prevent it from happening, so thanks for asking that. But it's very important just to be honest with them. Just tell them, like, it's a reflection of themselves and how they're feeling, and then also, have the child think about, like, have the child do some self-reflection, and you ask them, do you think that about yourself? Do you believe that? And then reinforce the positive things, like, this isn't, like, it isn't true, and then also, like, and then reinforce whatever the qualities or characteristics that the child does possess. And then also encourage them to not feed into it, to always be that, like, be that light. While they're getting bullied, like, just still saying, I mean, nothing you're saying is applying to me, if they can, you know, because it comes down to the personality as well. So if they can, and if they are a vocal child, they can bring it to the bully's attention that you can say whatever you want, but it's not true, it doesn't apply to me, and so the bully's going to give up because he's not getting the effect that he wants. He's not bringing that person down. So, yeah.
I feel like what's also important things that are said like that, it shouldn't just be disregarded. Like, if someone is being bullied, you should look into how they respond to it. You shouldn't just ignore it and just tell them, oh, you'll be fine, or you'll be over this.
Yeah.
That's not a big deal. Like, disregarding something, I feel like it's more of a problem in child development, especially in early child development, than the later stages. If you just deflect and start acknowledging it and fixing it and talking about it, it's better than closing it.
Oh.
It's important in general with mental health, in the psychological background. Did you have anything to talk?
Yeah, I was going to add, like, I'm a social worker now, and I always tell them, like, you can't ignore them if you're able to do that, but like, you can also, like, you don't have to be aggressive, you can be assertive. Like, you just tell them, like, with a serious voice, look them in the eye, be like, leave me alone, or like, you can't say that about me. There's nothing wrong with standing up for yourself, but like, when it becomes as you're actually fighting that trauma.
Another thing that's really important, so before the bullying even takes place to begin with, it's important for the parent to, like, from infancy, to be instilling words of encouragement within their child. And so if their child has certain traits that highlight them, bring it to their attention. That way, when they are more aware, a lot of times too, like, the kid will say, no, I'm not, and whatever, like, but it's being replayed in their own mind. So that way, when the bully does say something, they come home and they bring it up, and you just are able to reflect back on the conversations that you have had. Again, it makes their own self-reflection easier. Like, what do you think? We've talked about this before. Like, what are the qualities that I see in you? Or what are the qualities that most people see in you? And it's kind of just, it isn't dismissing what, so exactly, you do not want to dismiss that the child is being bullied, but you do want to acknowledge and have the child acknowledge that what the bully is saying is not true and it doesn't apply to them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you're asking about another person. So like you want to assist helping them. Yeah. So again, words of encouragement. And trauma is a really hard thing to try to work someone with. To try to work through with someone. Because a lot of times with trauma, I guess like the best thing to do is really encourage them to talk to a professional. Because sometimes a big part that it is important is acknowledging their strengths. And to acknowledge their strengths, sometimes you do need to bring up a little bit of that trauma, but bringing up that trauma can actually do more. Exactly, like it can do more harm. Oh yeah, and actually, so that whole like regaining control, so that's a big part of it. So because of the trauma and it's constantly replaying in their mind, they have repetitive moments where they feel like their life is out of control, or they're replaying what had happened to them and they feel the guilt and they feel like they failed for not being in control in that situation. And so they'll compensate for that lack of control with food, or with withholding from eating. And so, no, it's with a lot of things. So with anxiety and depression, it's just ruminating on the thoughts. Depression, you just kind of put yourself deeper into that low mood and dig yourself deeper into the hole. And then with anxiety, you're just replaying the thoughts, and you're just creating more distorted negative self-talk, distorted negative thoughts. And then obviously there's the trauma disorders. But as far as trauma related to eating disorders, that's usually how it works, yeah.
With just traumatic incidences that lead to post-traumatic stress disorder, or acute stress disorder and stuff like that, it's really important to actually seek out professional help. Now, I'm not saying when you seek out professional help that it's going to be, let's say, medication and it's over with. No, that's cognitive behavioral therapy is really important in that sense. And there's different types of therapy techniques that psychiatrists use and mental health workers can use as well. The thing is, like she was explaining, the little dangers about it with some people is you're not sure how everyone has a different reaction. So unraveling something that might have happened years and years ago might be a little more dangerous to that person than therapeutic. So it's really important to leave that to a professional. And, I'm sure people that have had traumatic incidents will find the best, most beneficial place to be professional.
Mm-hmm. But definitely empathize with them, and try to understand, try your best to understand and reflect that you understand you can't imagine what they must be going through, or what they have been through, and then just kindly suggesting, like, have you ever considered talking to a professional about it? And something I completely forgot to mention, a lot of the oftentimes eating disorders are comorbid with another disorder. It was your question about trauma that reminded me, because it can go hand in hand with other disorders. So it's not always just alone. It's actually rarely alone. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Any questions? Any personal experiences that you'd like to share? Yes, go.
Well, actually, so I have a 10-year-old sister, and she's going through this phase of exactly answering the question of that she has hair on her hands and her arm, and she would come home crying, and this kids would point it out to her, and we had to deal with it. And there's one thing my mom always told me when I was younger, and I repeated it to her, and it's that she's my sister, so I sound full of myself saying this, but she's gorgeous. She's a gorgeous girl. And I just tell her, I'm like, the only reason why bullies point out flaws in other people is because they're jealous of them. And that's something my mom used to always tell me. And I think she's slowly beginning to believe it as she's going older. And then now I see her she's getting to the selfies, in her face. And so she will send me selfies, and I will continue to say, you're so gorgeous, you're so pretty. And I do truly think that she's starting to believe that. So that's one thing my mom used to always tell me. People will never point something out of you unless they're jealous of it or they don't see it in themselves. They're lacking it.
Which reminds me, actually, so with the developing self-worth, and that's I don't remember if I had mentioned that earlier, but it's a ever-continuing journey. It's never ending. The thoughts never go away. So, as you had said, you're instilling these things within her so that when she does reach the age that we're at, she has the appropriate coping techniques that she can reflect back on that a lot of us didn't have because it wasn't really talked about back then.
Anything else? Well, thank you guys for coming. This is the time you guys can jump off.
Yeah, of course. If anybody has some like personal things, like any questions that they were shy to ask, you can find me on Instagram and message me, and then I'll ask your questions because I know it's like a sensitive topic, and so you might have some things that I didn't bring up or I didn't mention. So feel free to